Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are just off the gathering lawn because it's been raining for the last couple of weeks, and so our gathering lawn is just revivified. It is all green and beautiful now, and we are so excited about it. It is really the perfect spot for a horticulture hour, don't you think?
Wait a few minutes when the train goes by.
What was that?
Wait a few minutes when the train goes by.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, the perfect space for a horticulture hour. What's a horticulture hour without a train? Yes. Anyway, this is our hour-long Q&A where we are entertaining any and every question you may have about plants and horticulture. We've got our research technician, Villani, here, as well as our other research technician, Tim Alderton, as well as that tiger among men, that enhancer of the joys of his friends and the woes of his enemies, our director of horticulture, Greg Paige. That's right, truly an illustrious team here, and we are here to answer any and all of your horticulture questions, so it should be a fantabulous program. With that, we are ready to get started with our horticulture hour for today. So those of you joining us live, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them down in the chat and we will go through them. But we do have a tradition on the Hort Hour where
at least for me.
At least for Tim.
Yeah.
He goes around the garden and picks some things that are
And you stole my thunder.
things.
You said we had a second spring before I could.
So
these are my summer bulbs, and these, but it's like spring right now. A bunch of these, actually, I didn't even look at names on most of these, but I just collected some. But I have some lycoris here. Some of them are in full flower. Some are actually coming to pass, and there's a bunch more to come yet. This is a rosea hybrid, and this is a radiata, which is actually one of the parents of the rosea hybrids. But anyways, those are related to the narcissus, our daffodils, as are the rain lilies, which we've been saying that we've gotten a little bit of rain. We've had about, by my calculations, the last 3.5 or 4 weeks now, we've had about 14 inches here in the garden. So things have perked back up with this. That is why we are having a second spring. I thought we were going to have a perpetual winter in this summer, actually. But anyways, then I also, the crinums have been flowering off and on the last few weeks, and they will continue. So these are some of our daffodil and snowdrop relatives that we have, our winter flowers. So these are their cousins. For the hyacinth, our pineapple lilies are still flowering. I thought they sometimes don't like it when it gets too hot and dry and will flop and burn, but they got rain just about in time, and they are all looking great in the garden right now. This is a seedling. We have so many seedlings of them. They like to get around, but this is related to the hyacinths that we grow. And then there's spring flowering alliums too, and winter and spring flowering alliums, and we still have alliums growing in the garden. So I thought these are just our second spring right here. So
a nice icebreaker.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a balloon flower, the plated cladon.
Yeah, that's companion, a relative, but yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't noticed them until we put one right on the corner of the lat house.
Okay, there's a bunch in the white garden too.
Yeah, nice. Now I can see them. My eyes have been opened.
Beautiful. Well, that actually segues perfectly into the first question that we got. Paul wanted to know what plants have rebounded the quickest in the Arboretum since it started raining again.
The weeds?
Magnolias.
The weeds and the grass.
Yeah,
the grass.
honestly.
I hadn't cut the grass in like a month and a half, and I've now had to cut it like 3 weeks in a row.
Have we cut the grass behind us this year?
Yes.
Maybe once?
Yes, we've cut it 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, and it needs it again.
It's flowering right now.
Oh yeah, this has been very much slower growing, but yes, the lawns are growing. As much as I hate to have to mow the lawn, it seems so nice to have to mow the lawn after the depressing May and June that we had with no rain.
Honestly.
So I am so excited. Other things, our geophyte border was like it just took its good old time. In the last few weeks, it has gone, and it has exploded. Our pipe vines, where our butterflies, our pipe vine butterflies, our swallowtails eat, it's exploded. The Hymenocallis that are in that border are starting to do their thing again. They were just kind of sitting there biding their time. The hardy gloxinias, the syningias, they're doing their thing as well. The perennial border is coming back to life as well. So I am so much more, I was getting rather depressed with the drought. So
it was depressing.
But the plants have all, the rain versus irrigation is superior.
No kidding.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
We can't
contest.
water like Mother Nature can.
And I don't know, there's something about rain and versus irrigation water.
I think it's just not enough.
Oh, yeah?
It's not nearly enough. It's like putting someone said it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's like you're trying to, even if we do it preemptively, it's just not the same as getting a rain that drenches everything, because we don't see all the roots in the soil, and we'll never water all the space that the plant's taking up, and it's never going to get deep enough to where those deep roots actually are, and
Nope.
it's just like spitting into the wind. I don't know.
It's like Evan mentioned the magnolias. Some of the magnolias, they are having, again, their second spring as well. Just even some of the deciduous ones. I think they kind of get artificially put, due to stress, they were artificially put into a dormancy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they bounced out of it. And we had a few that actually flowered heavily. I kind of worry we might not have a display next spring on some.
No kidding.
But the plants are looking so much better. Our marrow here in the White Garden was really depressing, and I watered it.
Yeah.
And it flowered for 3 days during the 100-degree weather we had in early July, and then it has re-leafed out. It looks healthy now, thank goodness.
And Tim, I just want to say that your feelings are valid, and you're welcome to be depressed by a defoliated magnolia in the summer. However, I looked at those same defoliated magnolias, and it inspired me with hope, honestly, because their response to the heat and the drought was to defoliate and set new buds. Like, that's how you naturally respond. That's how you stop transpiring too much. That's how you maintain your water. So it's like, that's how it's weathering the storm, for lack of a better way to say that. And then now that we've actually got rain, they're reflushing. They're green again. Yeah, they're flowering in places, and that is going to be a sink for energy. That's probably going to make them flower less next year. But like the fact that they can make it through that whole
they're so resilient.
That they're so resilient. And one of my favorite things about magnolias is the fuzzy little buds on them. And we got that twice this year, which is not something you always get. So we got 2 doses of the flowers, 2 doses of fuzzy buds. Like, what a beautiful
You had to look
world
quick,
we live
though.
in.
You had to look really quick. Like I said, 3 days of Merrill instead of
It's hot.
2 months.
Or you just got to be in the garden every day, and then you won't miss it. Like, for
why not
sure.
work here?
Yeah, why not work here? No kidding. We're hiring some temp positions for college students. Surely.
Come on out.
Come on down. Okay, that was fantastic. But the garden really is looking wonderful after the rain that we've had. So if it's been a minute since you've been out here, you definitely want to schedule a trip out again.
Definitely.
Okay, so we actually had a question emailed to me from Carrie, who's one of our longtime volunteers, as a matter of fact. But he's asking, 2 years ago, we removed a 25-foot tall Kentucky coffee tree whose roots were extending into our garden. Despite treating the stump and some exposed roots with glyphosate, we still have shoots popping up in the garden. There were also roots growing up into large pots sitting on the ground 50 feet away from the stump. Any suggestions on controlling this zombie tree?
I have really bad news for you.
Oh, no.
That's going to be around through the apocalypse.
Oh, God.
They are notorious suckers and spread their roots everywhere. It's touted as a good native urban tree, and they're very tough. But for this reason, I'd never recommend it as a tree to plant in your garden.
No kidding.
Because it spreads far and wide. And I think when you cut it down, all those resources that were going into the tree go into those massive root suckers that are spreading out everywhere. And there isn't enough chemical in the world to get rid of that. What I usually tell people is to try to remove those mechanically, rip them out if you can, just constantly cut them back. And I think that's a better approach than spraying herbicide on them repeatedly. That's going to give them just as much a bad day as chemically doing it, because chemically you're not going to control it. The resources of those roots is just too massive, and not enough of the chemical is going to go where they're at. But it's going to be one of those things that's going to be with you forever. I worked in a garden where we had the same problem. They planted them on a border where there was a perennial bed. They started coming up everywhere. They cut them all down, and the suckers came up like almost overnight. It was an absolute
It's naturally a colony-forming species, much like its cousin, the Robinias.
Yes.
They also do the same exact thing.
Yes.
Not exactly the same, but kind of the same idea. Or crepe myrtles. If you try to take down a crepe myrtle, it will resprout that's from root cuttings in reality in that case. But it's that root mass that is under the ground, and it lets us realize how extensive that structure is in reality. It is not very localized. You know, some would say, oh, it's just at the perimeter of the branches structure, but it's well beyond that.
Well beyond that, yeah.
Does that apply for a tree that dies naturally as well? Because we have that is a Cladorestis that's about to go in the west. Right?
That would not have, I don't think that would have that.
Yellowwood?
Yeah, yellowwood.
Yellowwood's different.
Yeah.
Sorry.
From Kentucky coffee tree.
Okay.
There is a Kentucky coffee tree down there too. And
that's Gymnoculus dioicus.
Yeah. That has some suckers,
Yes.
but not a ton. And I'm not quite sure why. I think maybe because
It's always been there. I've had suckers there the last 20 years.
Yeah. It's just be glad you only have the one.
But again, that's a grafted one too. And the trouble is the rootstock is not the same as the scion. So,
but still, if a Gymnocladus died naturally,
it would probably, if it died naturally,
it depends on what kills it.
Yeah.
I think that's part of how they reproduce.
It's kind of like the aspens out in the west. There's the Pando.
Yeah.
You know, that is how many 1,000 acres.
Right.
It's a clonal plant.
Yeah.
And so it's the same idea. It could persist. It might not.
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, for sure. And it's difficult when you got like a tree that's like a native tree, but it's not behaving particularly friendly. But it's still a great tree. It's sad that it's swallowing your yard, Carrie.
I'm not surprised to hear that, unfortunately.
No kidding. But I mean,
you plant them in the middle of a lawn and you mow it perpetually. You don't put it in a planted bed that you want to keep out.
My neighbors across the street, they recently took down their crepe myrtle and then they ground the stump down. And now there's like a hedge of crepe myrtles coming up. And it's like, they've let it go too long. But like, if you imagine, as soon as they start sprouting back, if you could include that in your just mowing, generally, that'd be the easiest way, because eventually you will deplete the carbohydrates. It's just a question of, are you willing to keep at it persistently?
To be patient and just every year mechanically whack those things back.
For sure.
That gives it just as bad of a day as chemicals will.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would go that route, saw and pruner, and lots of cuss words.
Or just go around, start telling everybody that Kentucky coffee tree is your favorite tree in the world.
Come and dig up a sucker.
That's why it's the only thing in your garden. Anyway, let's do another question. This is a question that was a comment that was left on Evan's plant hormones video. She says, Evan, I've only been gardening a handful of years and this was fascinating. Why is it common practice when you're dividing a plant to cut off some of the foliage so that the roots can support the plant?
Right, so that's dealing with transpiration. So as Blake mentioned with like that magnolia, it was dropping leaves during the drought so that there was less water going out of those leaves because plants at all times or most times are photosynthesizing, making energy, and to do that they have to take in the carbon, which they then form into sugar, but to take in that carbon they have to open up little pores in their leaves and they lose water during that process. So whenever we're damaging a plant heavily, especially during any sort of propagation, that is taking cuttings, making divisions, we want to reduce the leaf mass as much as possible. We want to leave some, enough for the plant to produce its own energy, but not so much that it's not going to have time for the roots to reestablish. Because when you're taking a division, you're cutting off like at least half the roots of the plant, conservatively half.
Yeah.
And you could do a lot more. And so it's just giving that plant time to regenerate.
Nice.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Evan. Okie dokie. Mary has a small Akuba she planted in early spring and it turned black and disappeared. One recently came back and is an inch tall. She says she was hoping they'd be a 4-foot bush or so eventually and block that part of the fence. Should she not plant anymore? Should she give up? They're in a part shade area. Is it just that they don't like this much rain, or is it they don't like the drought?
They don't like the drought.
It's the drought.
Yeah, so I had one of the first clients I worked for. She had a big Akuba in her yard. It was like a 6-foot tall variegated Akuba. She would take cuttings and stick them directly in the ground.
No kidding.
It was like a slightly riparian area, so it was really moist. But like that was crazy to me, and yet even still, this drought blackened.
Yeah. It's the drought. Once they wilt, they don't like to come back on a Cuba, especially.
No kidding.
So yeah.
And if you're planting it this spring, going into the worst drought that we've had in a while, like that's an uphill battle that you're going to be fighting all spring long.
It's typically a dry shade tolerant plant, but this was
once it's established.
Established, but this was the exception to the rule.
We lost a few in the Asian Valley too, even though we were irrigating too, as we could, and so
we lose weird ones in the nursery too.
Yes.
Ones that just aren't that vigorous, like heavily variegated ones.
For no reason. Yeah.
They're just weak.
But that if it's resprouted, it might grow, but just have to be patient.
No kidding. Yeah. And it's like when they resprout and they're small like that, like it's a lot of patience and maybe even some protection, because it's like a careless rabbit walking by could not even biting it, they could just trip over it and end its life.
Or
so
look at it harshly.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it might be not the worst idea to plant, like if you really want an Akuba there, then plant more, because that little baby one, that's going to take a good long while to get to your 4 feet size.
And it might be good to plant in the fall when we go into a more consistently moist period.
Absolutely.
Plant a bigger plant in the fall.
Yeah, for sure. But should you give up? Absolutely not.
Never
until you've killed 3.
Until you've killed 3, then maybe think about a different
3
place.
strikes and you're out.
Or a different plant for that place, for sure. Okie dokie. So Marilyn is asking, if I plant seeds I collect from my Zephranthes, the rain lilies, how likely are they to be the same color as their mother plant? She says that she does have Zephranthes of other colors in the garden, but she tries to keep all the yellow ones on one side of the yard and the pink ones somewhere
In my
else.
experience, they almost always are the same.
No kidding.
I have not had anything pop up that was spectacularly different from them. You'd have to probably be actively doing a cross to actually get anything different.
Do you think it's a chance?
Because I have so many growing right next to each other, and they all come back.
stay.
Do you think it's a chance that just the F1 are just presenting as,
or it could be that if you could, that's possible
where
too.
if you were to collect seed from that and then grow those out and then cross those, that maybe you get new varieties?
Maybe. I don't know the genetics of the Zephranthes, but in my experience, I have not. I mean, I have too many of them growing too close together, and I've never seen anything change.
So you're safe.
Yeah. The chances are you're safe.
Okay. Sure. So just sow them all out.
If there is something different, you're really lucky.
There you go. That's nice. Like a little surprise. Okay. Myra says that she would like to plant a blue tree, like Colorado blue spruce, in her yard. Do you have some recommendations for those that would thrive in our climate in a lot of sun? We'd prefer one that doesn't have a large spread. Thank you.
I'd say Arizona cypress here.
Ooh, yeah.
Colorado blue spruces. This is not Colorado.
No.
They 7,000 to 10,000 feet. Yeah. We are not.
No, there are a couple cultivars that do well.
Survive.
And most of those are kind of broad. So Arizona cypress is your go-to kind of blue.
Some of the junipers.
There are some junipers. That one that we looked at the other day, that Wichita blue, that which is a Colorado species. That one does well for us, but my favorites are the Arizona cypress.
They smell wonderful too.
They smell wonderful. They can be pruned if you don't want them to get wide. I'm trying to think of some of the cultivars that stay kind of narrow. Blue sapphire.
Yeah, I think
is more.
Yeah,
of
not
an upright
not
one.
sapphire skies.
No,
or Carolina sapphire.
Or Carolina. That's been quite broad.
Yeah, that one gets pretty big. But that's a heat tolerant, sun tolerant.
Yeah. They don't want to be wet though.
They don't like their feet wet. They like a decently drained soil. Once they're established, they grow pretty quickly for a conifer. But I love that color blue.
They're great if you want to prune them in the winter or at Christmas. You can use them for
bring the stuff inside.
Bring it inside for decorations. Yeah,
no
I made a beautiful blue wreath.
I did last year.
Yeah, a couple years ago. Yeah.
Nice. So I was recently given a Cedrus deodara.
Those will also work as well.
Feelin' Blue was the cultivar. It was a weeping cultivar.
That's a little compact thing.
It's a little compact thing, but they can get big. If you stake it up, you could presumably get it to stay in a pretty narrow area.
Yeah, we have sunny days that I planted over there.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be, I mean, they might have more of a, I don't know, they're not
moppy.
They're not predictable.
Yeah,
Sure.
they architectural. They're individuals. They don't have a consistent shape to me.
No kidding, yeah.
Something it's not as happy here would be a fastigiate blue Atlas cedar. Though it's
no kidding.
Yeah, which there's
We
one
have-
right over here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Blue
It
Atlas
looks okay.
cedars. Yeah, it's been there 20 years.
Yeah.
They're okay here.
Okay.
But,
They're not as dense though.
yeah, and that's what I don't like about the
Yeah.
cedrus in comparison to the. It's
Which
literally
one is it, Evan?
that's one that's sticking up right behind us.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, up.
I moved that there in probably January of
one.
2007.
Yeah, that's the
so
one.
yeah,
Okay, but it's called the Blue Atlas cedar because it's from the Atlas Mountains
Mountains,
of North Africa,
Yeah.
which explains why
it doesn't like
love it
moisture
here.
as it's more the moisture, the humidity.
Yeah.
The deodors take our humidity better.
Right. Yeah.
But I haven't seen any. Have you seen a conical one of them?
No.
They tend to be really architectural and
Yes.
all
Right.
individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you want to be fiddly with the weeping cultivar, making it arc up and weep and that kind of, if you want to get artsy fartsy with it, for sure, I think I'd recommend that. But
Yep.
not very many well-behaved,
Yeah.
low-maintenance ones of
No.
those. Okay, but lots of beautiful blue plants anyway.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the other thing I find with those, I get sometimes get pine sawfly,
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
which you don't get that on the cedrus.
Okay. Well, great. Those were great recommendations. Let's see. Who's next? Mary says, I told my sister in Raleigh near NC State I'd plant some fall and spring bulbs for her. I was thinking daffodils for spring since they are all around in spring. Where are good places to get bulbs? When should I get them? What kinds are easy to grow here? And what about fall bulbs?
Any narcissus you can buy is probably good. And there's a lot of different companies. I hate to put out names, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're not supposed to recommend, but Brent and Becky's is a good one.
They've been
They're
very
longtime
good to
friends
us.
of the garden.
But any that you can find, narcissus are great as long as they get good light. I mean, if they'll flower for a short time in shade, but then they'll fizzle away, especially jonquil types. But the more sun you give those, the better. Anything snowdrops, wonderful for us here, especially the Elvesii types.
Yep.
They're not as easy to find. And if you can get them in the green, it's even better than getting them as dry bulbs. But if you can get them, plant a large number. You might not get a high number initially of the dry bulbs to take, but the few that survive will persist and multiply, and you can divide them additionally. Neither of those are eaten by anything is the great thing about those.
Tulips are pretty, but most tulips
they're-
are perennialized, and they're only going to last for 1 to 2 seasons.
Unless you do some of the things like Clusianus,
Yes, the
but you have to
species.
deal with squirrels
Species.
and rabbits.
Yeah.
Like chorus is good.
Like chorus, which is what these are. These are fall. Or late summer and fall flowering, like chorus. Nothing will touch those either. They look like foliage-wise, they look like a narcissus that refuses to flower for you in the winter and spring. And then they're naked ladies, surprise lilies, hurricane lilies. There's various names for them because they pop up out of the nowhere in the late summer. Right now is when they're just they're coming into their own.
We've got a
hyacinth
really good
person?
collection of spring flowering bulbs here, so I always recommend coming here to look to get ideas for things, but mostly mail order sources.
Yeah, mail order sources are going to be great for you. Anything in the hyacinth that are closely related to hyacinth are safe for us. So like Chionodoxa, I'm blanking. Hyacinth, Scillas, Hyacinthoides, those are all real good for you. The Hyacinthoides are great, and they'll take some shade as well, much like the Galanthus. And they can also take it a bit moister as well. Another great spring bulb are the Camasias.
Yes.
And nothing eats those either. So things that are I love, but the rabbits and squirrels love are crocus and
It's almost pointless for us to plant them
crocus
there.
and tulip. The standard tulips, they're pointless. They're just candy.
Sure.
Some of the, if you get them in the right spot, some of the Iris reticulata types.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those will do well here as well.
Yeah.
So those are just a handful of things. Leucojums, if you can get, I've never seen vernum here, but estivum, that grows like a weed for us. It'll grow sun, shade, wet, or dry.
Then most of those you can.
Iphions, Iphion actually can be almost a noxious weed if it gets happy. One of my favorite times here was, it must have been in, I think, spring of 2008, a husband came in here with a bag of this and says, how do I get this out of my lawn? My wife hates the smell. I told him to move. Actually, it goes summer dormant. So the foliage smells of bruised onions when you cut it in the spring. So, but they are beautiful, and they can flower anytime from January to April. They have a really long flowering season. Nothing eats them either. They do better with more light. Ours have started to fizzle in some areas where they're getting more shade. Though.
And when would you buy and plant?
Most of those, I would plant in the fall. The lycoris, if you could get them, anytime you can get them.
Sure.
Basically, with lycoris, whether they're flowering in the in a pot or not. So but the others you can probably buy them dry and plant them. Some of the lycoris tend to take a few years to settle in before they do too much.
Yeah.
There is some patience there. So, but yeah.
Nice.
That's a handful of things.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's a huge palette of bulbs.
Yeah. I mean, cyclamens for dry shade.
No kidding.
And we're already having them in flower right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, the heterofolium types.
For sure.
And the foliage is the reason to grow them for the winter. The foliage is spectacular in the winter, and even when they're not in flower.
No kidding. So just set yourself a budget and then just go blow it all on bulbs.
There you go.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Run Johnny has a question. They say they've been using BR1 compost. They're wondering, could BR1 be used as an alternative to soil cubed for improving garden soil, especially for vegetables, perennials, and roses?
I don't know what BR1 is, but
remember
any compost I think should be useful.
I always tell people
to
to take that with a grain of salt because Barb Fair actually did a study here on compost. Too much of a good thing. Adding too much organic matter is not advisable.
Sure.
You're doing a midweek on soil testing pretty soon, aren't you?
We're filming it, but we don't know when it's going to get released.
We're going to broadcast that.
Test your soil, see if you actually need to add a lot of organic matter. I'm always wary of bag stuff because you don't know how long it's been in the bags. I'm not familiar with that particular brand, and I wouldn't recommend one over the other. I know you can get compost from the city. Sometimes it's free, and that's going to be a little bit better. I think for your garden, that something was bagged and possibly processed. And again, how long it's been in that bag. But always do a soil test first. See what you've got, what you need, how much organic matter you actually need to add to your soil. Sometimes just mulching is good enough as that kind of breaks down with hardwood.
The compost.
Yes, or mix that with compost, or like we do here, we mulch with leaves that are already sort of kind of in that state of breaking down. But don't just without a little bit of homework see what you actually need to make your soil better before you just put a bunch of stuff out.
Yeah,
for sure.
I tend to go in just general rules, like most composts are pretty interchangeable. But yeah, to Greg's point, it's like you can't add too much, so sometimes just topsoil is good for improving your soil. And then when it comes to vegetable beds and vegetable gardening,
you feed a lot more.
Yeah, you have to feed them, and you have to be careful with like where your compost is coming from. Yeah. So before you just do a little research with that, I don't know.
If there could be there's been herbicides that have been, it's like, I think they said there was a herbicide that they used on cattle fields.
Sure.
And it passed through the cattle, and it got in the manure that they used in the compost.
Right. And it's tricky because year to year it's going to be different depending on the batch. And it's like, if you're not testing the compost itself, then you don't know, you can't know what's in it. There's a chance that it's something that's not good for it, honestly. But it's like to Evan's point, like it doesn't so much matter like if you're using BR1 or Soil Cube, like any particular brand. Like what matters is if you're adding organic matter.
Yes.
Like compost is compost, really. You don't have to focus on the actual like substance of it. Just as long as you're adding organic matter, not too much organic matter, but just adding it to provide the structure and all the benefits that it provides. That's all you need to do.
It's got nothing to do with the brand.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with that's marketing hype.
Right. The plant's not looking at that big yellow bag and being like,
oh, I'm hungry for that tonight.
Yeah. Be careful what you say, because there's a sniper on the roof from the...
The thing that's nice about those bags is they're easy to move around.
And that is a great thing about this.
That's a huge convenience.
And it's contained instead of getting it dumped on your yard or your sidewalk or your driveway.
I prefer the dump every time.
I do too, because it's it's fresher.
But it's convenient to get it. They can haul it like
It's
into
very-
the
They
Get it
backyard.
close to the backyard.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
they can take it in with a piece of equipment that's small.
Alrighty. So let's move on to another question. Gail wants to know, is it too late to prune lacecap hydrangea? She says she's been hesitant due to the extreme heat and droughty conditions, but she also says that she's not had as much rain as the triangle has, but she is receiving some.
I mean, I would go so far as to say it's okay to do some deadheading. I wouldn't do any kind of major structural pruning. You want to keep as much of that foliage on the plant as possible. You don't want to stress it out by doing a lot of heavy pruning, especially if you're in an area that's still super dry. Even here, we're not out of the woods yet. We've had a lot of rain, but August and September
Turn right around.
are usually pretty dry months, and we could go right back into that cycle again. I think we're being a little bit premature by lifting the restrictions.
Sure.
But that's my humble opinion solely, not JCRA's opinion, mine. So I would err on the side of caution. We're still kind of in that stressful situation. Deadheading, maybe a little bit of thinning. I wouldn't go hog wild and do a lot of pruning.
If there's a
right
dead
now.
branch,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And like, really, a lot of people feel like they have to prune, like you need to prune, like it's an obligation. You have a hydrangea, you must prune. But it's like, unless you have a reason to prune, you don't need to. Like if you're trying to control growth, okay, then maybe, yeah, wait, like we were saying. But like, if there's no reason to reduce the size of it, then there's no reason to prune it whatsoever. Just let it live its happy little hydrangea life, and you can do the same to the best of your abilities. I know you're not a hydrangea, so that's going to be a little difficult.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Jennifer wants to know, when should I prune mums for that lovely mounded shape and good blooms in the fall?
I mean, I think this is past to do that. For those perfect ones you see in the stores in the fall, they probably, if there's, in just a standard pot, there'll be one cutting. It might not even be pinched anymore. They just stick a cutting in there. They have been bred to be super branchers.
They have no apical dominance.
Yeah,
they branch at every possible point, and they branch evenly.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, they have selected.
There's your perfect balls, and you can plant a perfect ball, and it will always come back as a perfect ball.
Yeah.
And then some random years they'll die. But I'm a big fan of the garden hydrangeas, which are
mums.
Mums.
We had hydrangeas on it's
okay.
What I would do is, like, earlier in the summer, if you have an established clump of them and they happen to be those type that you bought when it was perfect, I would have thinned it out earlier in the season, and you could have spaced them out, and it's a bit past for that at this point.
Sure.
And your garden, I was about to say it again. In your garden mums, you don't have to let them mound at all. They do their own
They'll
thing.
just form a colony.
And you can cut them back so they're all the same height.
I would probably wait.
Nice.
It wouldn't do it much past mid-July, which we are now at that point. So just past that. So to make sure that you get good bud set.
Okay. Ron Johnny wants to know, how do I control Japanese stilt grass that is growing a lot after the rain?
Weed whack every year.
Yep.
It's pretty easy to pull out of the ground.
Yes, it is
too.
very easy to pull.
That's what I would do. Is just pull it out. It's easy to come out, especially we were very gleeful last Friday when we were pulling weeds down here because stuff was just coming out.
Comes out
so easy after a good rain.
The thing is with that it does break very easily. I will say that.
Sure.
And it likes to go over, and it makes these
little nodes.
It roots at the node and drops a root. But it also, the flowers are almost impossible. We are in a safe time. At this point, they have not flowered.
Yeah.
So, but any weeding you can do right now with it should be fairly easy. Preventative, you could use a pre-emergent in the late winter, early spring.
You could spray it with herbicide too.
But it's easy to pull.
It's a really bad weed in the Mid-Atlantic, more so than here. It's beautiful, I think. It's got a really nice look to it, but it just chokes everything else out.
And it'll clamor over other things.
Yes, I've seen a lot of it in Shank.
Starting to spring. And it's also in Umstead.
Yeah.
But not as bad as it used to be.
I don't know. I'm sure there, aside from recommending chemical treatments, I'm not sure what the answer is.
Yeah.
From a garden perspective,
if it's a small colony, just pull it.
Alrighty. So Marilyn would like to know, how long should I wait to cut down a dead-looking river birch tree before giving it a chance to re-sprout? 3 seeded in along her lakeshore 30 years ago. They leafed out this spring, but the leaves never got more than half the normal size. Now that we've had a foot of rain in the last 7 weeks, the lake's only about 3 inches low. So you think there's a chance the tree will come back?
Threshold of tolerance. If you're tired of it and it's not doing what you want, give something else a chance.
Sure.
But they're, again, it's, drought stress. They'll look like crap right now. And we're going into that time of the year, August, when things are getting kind of shaggy, especially this year because it's been such a brutal summer. If you've got the patience to wait till next year, it'll put out new growth after the winter. But if it sounds like they're not performing like you would
And you said it was 30 years?
They've been in there for 30 years.
I hate to say, a river birch they can live longer than that.
That might be the end of its life cycle.
But it could be of looking presentable to, like you were saying, your threshold.
Yeah, and some of if they are seedlings and not cultivars, some of the seedlings get kind of ugly looking as they get older and just don't perform that well. The cultivars are geared to have better shape and form and nicer bark texture and all that kind of stuff, better leaf textures. But I don't know, if they were mine and they'd been in that long and I'm not happy with them, firewood time.
Sure.
I'm thinking if the leaves went brown and still hung on.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. If the leaves hung on, that could mean it's death.
Yeah.
Sure.
If they fell off.
Do the scratch test. Scratch the twigs. If the twigs are brown, they're dead.
Yeah, if the leaves hold on something, typically the plant, the tissue died, and it could create an abscission layer to drop the leaf down.
Yes.
And that's often a good indication that a branch is dead if it's holding dead leaves.
Toast is the official.
Yeah, or a true tree. If the branch, the whole tree, if it's holding leaves in it, that's a good indicator.
Toast.
There's a reason you're a director of horticulture.
That's it right there.
Big words.
You just found it out. Just found out my secret.
Awesome. Okay. Jan wants to know, do you think that pruning in summer stops growth, for instance, to maintain a certain height, and pruning in late winter encourages growth?
I'm going to go back to Mark's answer to pruning, and my former boss, one of my favorite people on the earth, Jeff Jabko at Swarthmore College, recently said this. Somebody asked Jeff what was the biggest misconception in horticulture, is that you have to prune at a certain time of the year. From a flower perspective, yes, but prune when you have time. Right now, as I've mentioned before, we're telling people not to go crazy with pruning because of the weather. But you have to have goals for things that you're wanting to prune. And Evan and I talked about this in a midweek. Was that this summer that we did that?
Yeah, practical pruning. It's a good one.
Having goals is very important. And if you've got time to prune something and you're willing to sacrifice things that might flower, then that's the time to do it. If you want things to get big, then obviously don't prune them. Things are dormant in the going into late fall, winter time. That's a good time to prune because you can see the structure of things. If that's your goal to structural prune, that's the time to do it. If you're trying to reduce the size of something, any time of the year, but that goes back into right plant for the right place. So we could go down a lot of different rabbit holes with this. The easy answer is it depends.
Sure.
It depends on what your goals are.
One thing that I remember when Ted was here, and he did nursery stuff, but he told me that the rosaceae, or that is apples and peaches, pears, cherries, if you prune them in the summer, they don't sucker back. If you prune them in the winter, which is typical time they do it, they tend to sucker and form lots of water sprouts. So there is sometimes a reason for it, but not everything fits that same schedule, you might say. So, and not everything does the same thing, reacts the same way.
Nope.
I think one last asterisk I'll put is that if it's a plant that only flushes once a year, then if you prune it in summer, it kind of sits there. It's going to stop the growth because there's nothing left for it to flush. But if it's a multiple flusher, then
the other time is
depends.
the other time is if you're doing anything drastic pruning, people who hedge things hard, they do it in October or November, and it's like you sit there for 3 months.
Well, or it pushes a lot of growth.
Or new growth, whichever, in the winter, either if it's either it flushes really late and gets damaged, or it sits there looking dead all winter, and you have to look at it.
Yeah.
I'd rather do like a hedge, a major pruning
Early spring.
in late winter, early spring, so that you don't have to look at it long.
It depends.
Yeah, so there is that. Yeah. Again, it goes back to that threshold too.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, but generally speaking, pruning encourages growth.
Yes.
It elicits growth
does.
responses
Of a healthy plant.
of healthy plants
Yes.
that flush multiple times a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk.
Lots of
There's
asterisks.
it always depends.
Yeah. Alrighty. Bob says, crepe myrtle bark scale. It was really bad last year, but he's had nothing at all this year with no treatment. He's wondering, will it return, or is
I
his
was
tree
hoping the
going
same
to continue
thing.
to be a happy
We've
tree?
been talking about that. We've
I've had a lot of it the last 3 weeks.
We've treated a small portion of our bigger kind of legacy crepe myrtles, and then we've been doing a combination of cutting things back, a combination of low impact oil treatment, and we were like, we're not seeing a lot. Maybe the winter killed them, but over the last couple weeks, they've
all popped. It's like it's all back.
They're just waiting.
And the
I think-
ants are spread it too, and they've become really active.
I think the drought has impacted that. Because early on this year, I was checking for eggs, I was checking for crawlers, and I didn't see that much. But they are definitely on the move.
Yeah, they're everywhere right now.
So, I don't know what the answer is.
Sure. Well, you say that it always goes in cycles.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
presumably you'll have boom years, presumably you'll have less
Yeah.
active years. And last year was definitely a boom year. When we were first started getting the infestations, it's like clearly that's a lot. So it would make sense that you would have a population crash immediately thereafter, but it also makes sense that it would rebound with a vengeance.
I was so happy when, and like I spoke to. It's like I kind of whispered it to Greg, and in the last 3 weeks since we started to get rain, it's just everywhere. The other thing I've noticed, not crepe myrtle barks, have you sprayed my cannas?
Some of them, not many.
Okay,
there
because
aren't as many leaf rollers.
I haven't seen as many leaf rollers. Next week they're going to be everywhere.
I think the winter did have an effect on crepe myrtle scale and other pests.
Because it was a good winter. We got real
Yes.
cold.
We had 2 weeks.
We got cold, so I think that helped curb some of the. We're seeing crepe myrtle bark scale here, but not like we've seen in other points of the year.
Yeah.
So I think it has had an effect because there's other pests like we get canna leaf rollers, we get the mimosa webworm, we get lots of other things, and in the garden the pests haven't been as bad. Japanese beetles weren't that bad this year.
I mean, I never had them bad here.
Right now the June bugs are emerging, and I've seen like at home I've got them all over the place. But
There's
I think
fewer this year of those.
I think there's fewer, and I think that is due to the winter that we've had.
And maybe that just sets them back enough, and
It'll rebound.
It rebounds, yes, when we have a normal winter, or actually a terribly mild winters like we've been having more and more of.
Sure.
So, might be bode weather for people further north that they not spread as much up there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so Bob, enjoy your happy, healthy tree for the moment. Just be ready for whatever else may come.
Right.
Alrighty. Jen wants to know, why is it wrong to plant up in a much larger container? Like if you have a Japanese maple. She's saying, isn't that more like planting in the ground for the plant?
I could take that one.
Go for it, Evan.
So we don't, unless something is a super vigorous grower, the roots aren't gonna hit the edge of the pot and really fill in that space. So when you're planting, especially like a woody plant, into a much bigger pot, you end up with two different things. So you have like the root ball, which is established, and that's where the plant is soaking up all the water from, and then you have the rest of the pot. And depending on the media, that can either get like really wet or really dry, or you'll have two different environments. And Sophia can answer this better. But instead of it being one consistent environment for the roots to slowly spread into, it ends up being like the rest of the media and that root ball which you put in the middle of the pot, which is just not a great thing.
The plant could also probably rock a bit too, I would think,
sure.
because of that, because it's not filled. It's like
not loosening that root ball up
it's
too.
like when you think a child, you don't buy 3 sizes too bigger for them.
Definitely.
Whenever it's going to take them a couple years, to grow into it.
Yeah.
For sure.
They're going to be tripping over their pant legs.
Definitely.
So
for a couple years.
For a couple years.
And the pot's parts of the pot that has roots in it, that's going to absorb water, whereas the parts of the pot that don't have roots in it, that water is just going to sit there. And then anything that tries to grow out into it will just like rot off.
And also that potting media is going to break down too.
Yeah. It's basically really hard to manage water levels and just all sorts of everything in it when it's slightly too big. Okie dokie. So Dahlia says, hearing about an increase in fungal leaf spot diseases such as Cerospora and anthracnose now. For other than hydrangea macrophylla, on which it is so common, would you treat now or just remove infected leaves from the plant in ground and live with it? And Dahlia is, of course, asking for a friend.
I usually associate anthracnose with cool, wet weather.
Sure.
But I've seen it on some magnolias. I've had people send me pictures of magnolia with it, which is kind of unusual. I don't think I would treat anything at this time of the year because we're going into, things are going to start dropping leaves. I don't know how much control you're going to get if you treat stuff this time of the year.
Yeah.
And most fungal diseases are associated with like moisture and water and humidity and that kind of stuff. And we've been super dry up until just a couple weeks ago. But I think that's just going to rebound as we get more humid and if the rain continues. Again, it's all about threshold of tolerance. Is what can you tolerate in your landscape going into early fall when things are going to drop their leaves anyway. Is it worth it to do some kind of a treatment or let the leaves fall, do some cultural things to try to eliminate disease issues like air circulation, make sure you're mulching enough. All those sorts of things. I would err on the side of that before I would say do any kind of treatments.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do another question. Susan says, I planted 6 Liberty Bell boxwoods last fall. 2 died in the drought. When do y'all recommend replacing them? She's in Chapel Hill.
Fall again. Keep fingers crossed that we're in a more normal weather now and that we're not going to get dry again. We're discussing what we're going to do this fall, and I'm real hesitant to go nuts and put a lot of things out because we spent a lot of summer chasing those plants, trying to keep them alive, and had mixed success, not for any fault of our own, just, there's only so much that you can do, but I would wait till the fall. I would not do it now.
At least the temperatures tend to be a bit more stable, and theoretically the moisture level, because we don't have as much transpiration at that time of the year.
And things kind of going dormant and building up root systems and not doing a lot of foliage.
Hey, but those plants that did make it, they should be pretty tough, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
As we are tough from enduring the weather.
The ones we gave up on watering, and they made it all the way to the rain, so they got that good, deep watering.
Okay, it looks like we've got time for one more question, and it seems like a bit of this might be an interesting question. Okay, so Jennifer wants to know, any recommendations to plant in fall to compete with the Japanese stilt grass for next season? Very wet area in part shade, clay down low, and a strange sandy layer on top, probably more sediment than anything. She's trying some sedges and
That's what I was going to
juncus,
suggest.
but would love something with a little more color if you have any ideas.
Some of the sedges are
nice.
actually can be quite nice.
Yes.
Some of the variegated ones, the Oshamensis type Carex. There's a bunch of different, both yellow and variegated selections of those.
Feather falls.
I love the feather falls and the ribbon falls and moon falls.
Yeah.
Those have been they've been better for me than the Ever series.
Yeah.
But they don't have a yellow one of those yet. But I do like that could give you, mix a couple of I think it's Everillo.
What's the one in the white garden?
I think I have feather falls and I have moon falls in there.
Sure.
We've got that in sun, we've got it in shade.
And I have it in wet, I have it in dry. And they are resilient. They don't do any matter.
It takes them a beat to get big, but once you plant them and then make it through that first initial, just stand back and just let them do their thing.
Sure.
And the rabbits have not bothered those, while they've bothered my Ever series.
Yep.
No kidding.
Other things for texture-wise, I don't know that they won't be fast, but some of the Tiarellas might work.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're a little bit more moisture tolerant than Heucheras.
Absolutely.
Choose some of the spreading selections. I'm trying to think. maybe Pachysandra pecumbens, but I don't think it would want to be wet.
Okay.
It's hard to find that.
And yeah,
It can be finicky.
For sure.
Trying to think. The thing is the shade and the moisture combined.
No kidding. Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, hostas are great, but the rabbits love those too.
Hellebores?
Hellebores do not want wet. If it's not too wet, green and gold.
Okay.
Chrysogonum.
Oh, how about Asarum canadense?
Yeah, Sarum canadense might work because it's winter deciduous, it's summer active. Yeah. And it some of the ajugas could work, could work as well. But I like the canadense.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
It's actually a downright weedy sometimes if you don't want it to grow. But that's totally native, and that would work.
That's a good question.
Oh, tune into Greg's program on fast fillers for shade.
When am I doing that?
No, I think
What
that's
is that?
me.
Is that you?
It's
That's
both
me.
of you.
Oh, it is.
The
Oh,
two of
good.
you together.
I'm thinking,
It's all
okay.
three of you, really, because I'll be in
I'm
St.
filming.
Louis. Wednesday the 19th, we're doing fast fillers for shade on the midweek
I was
program.
trying to think that what could I use for? Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, there was a
Segue.
little addendum to the question since we were talking about what time of year. She says, well, when in fall?
So
September and October?
Yeah, that would be fun. September, October. Carricks are actually cool season active, so they will root in when it's cooler and actually be good to get established. And I think the Tiarellas would be much the same way.
Oh, sure.
And if you can find the Asarum canadensis, it will be going dormant then, but it should be. It would be fine to plant in the fall, and it would like grow like crazy first thing in the spring. So
A good place to get ideas are my two favorite garden catalogs, North Creek Nursery and Hoffman's.
yeah.
Great websites too that have good pictures and all that cultural information.
The Juncus that they mentioned, I think it might be too much shade
Okay.
because they tend to want full sun.
Okie dokie. Well, that looks like all of the questions we had for today and all of the time that we had for today anyway. So thank you for that. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Evan, for being here and fielding all of these questions for us. I'm sure we all learned a lot and we had a fun time doing it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Midweek program. We will be back next week. Ooh, next week's going to be special because Bryce Lane is going to be joining us.
What?
Bryce Lane and Mark Wethington are going to sit down and talk about their top 5 or 10 or 12 most influential gardens. So it should be really super special and all kinds of fun. So we hope we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.